Big Baller Beane. That is right, ladies and gentlemen. On today's episode of the Dom Mafia Show, we're going to be taking a little history lesson, a little walk down memory lane. So how did Brandon Beane do the past couple of drafts? I mean, honestly, this guy has been touted from people, including myself, saying that he is a cap wizard, a draft genius, largest out of all other GMs in the NFL. But is the proof actually there? Brandon Beane was hired in 2018, and since then he has participated in about 5 drafts. Some have been incredible, some have seen quite a few swing and misses. But what I wanted to do on this episode is I wanted to analyze literally each and every single pick from 2018 all the way up from last year, so we can get a good understanding of what we should expect going on into the draft that is just about to take place in Kansas City here within a couple of weeks. My name is Dan Mitchell, and I regularly put out videos about the NFL and the Buffalo Bills. If that is your cup of tea, I highly recommend smashing the out of that like button. And as always, subscribing and joining the family for some more football buffoonery. The second that Brandon Beane was hired, I'm sure many fans were simply just rejoicing that Doug Whaley no longer had anything to do with their organization, although he was the man that brought Nathan Peterman to this organization.
That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
The Bills were hungry for some new blood. And enter Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott. And let's just say that he hit the ground running in 2018. Josh Allen, Edmonds, Harrison Phillips, Taron Johnson, Ciaran Neal, Wyatt Teller, Ray McLeod, and then Austin Proehl. Now, the first overall pick, let's be honest with ourselves, Josh Allen. I mean, as soon as when we heard that announcement that we were moving up and we were going to get our guy, we can agree that Brandon Beane literally hit the nail on the head. Now, I do recall several Bills fans being very upset when we ended up drafting him. I wanted Josh Rosen. Thank God I'm not in Brandon Beane's position. But Brandon Beane ended up taking a giant gamble with literally one of the first major moves he made in his new role in Buffalo, and he hit a grand slam home run. Tremaine Edmonds, on the other hand, we know he got a great payday from Chicago, and many might argue that he never really lived up to his potential. I mean, granted, he is still young in current days. He was pretty solid in coverage, great tackler, and he did everything that he needed to do, but he wasn't what was promised. It really wasn't necessarily that first-round talent that we were expecting him to be. He never really got over the hill. He was a great player, don't get me wrong, don't come after me, but, I mean, really at the end of the day, it's definitely sad to see that that draftee is no longer on this team. Same thing with Harrison Phillips, he's now on the Vikings. If he were to stay healthy on a more consistent basis, I think that he might have been a great pick. A great pickup for the Buffalo Bills. I wish him nothing but the best in Minnesota moving forward. And so then you have Taron Johnson, who literally was a sleeper in the 4th round. Can you imagine one of the best slot corners in the league was picked up in the 4th round? I wouldn't have been able to guess that. Ciaran Neal has been great as far as depth is concerned. The only giant swing and a miss had to be Wyatt Teller. I mean, who were to know that this guy would be one of the best offensive linemen, and the only thing that needed to happen was Brandon Beane needed to trade him away. Now, looking over the 2018 draft, there really wasn't any, giant swings and misses. I mean, after Edmonds was taken in the first, Derwin James, Jair Alexander, and Calvin Ridley ended up being taken off the board a few short picks afterwards. And so I think Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde were still literally in their prime at that point, so Derwin James wasn't necessarily a need. And so I think Jair Alexander would have been interesting, but we know McDermott probably wouldn't have started using him until last year. But overall, with that specific draft, I had to give Brandon Beane an A- on this one. I mean, it was absolutely big. He filled the most important position that a roster needs to have in the quarterback, and he absolutely delivered. Next up in 2019. So I'm not going to lie to you, the sophomore slump is a real thing, and apparently it applies to front office antics in the NFL for GMs, because 2019 was not pretty. And so especially if you look at the current state of where these players are today. First round talent was Ed Oliver, then Cody Ford, Singletary, Dawson Knox, Foshan Joseph, Jaquan Johnson, Daryl Johnson, and Tommy Sweeney. Now, I'm not going to sit here and absolutely hate on Ed Oliver, but one thing I will say is that he gives me a lot of energy with Tremaine Edmonds, right? He's shown flashes in the pan of being an absolute elite defensive tackle. Whether or not that he's undersized, we don't know, but he still is yet to get over the hump. I thought he did well last year, but he's just not it. Not yet, at least. I'm hoping this year might be a little different from his perspective. And so I'm really hoping that he calms down on the whole Instagram subtweeting the Buffalo Bills organization. But here we are. So far, I would say out of everybody, though, that has been the leading performer. Next up, Cody Ford, giant swing and a miss. Absolute giant swing and a miss. I feel like everybody wanted him to be an answer on the offensive line. And after years and years of him being benched, him missing time, he just was not good out there. He was not good out there whatsoever. He's currently on the Bengals right now, nowhere near a Buffalo Bills roster. Singletary, as you know, is picked up by the Houston Texans, is no longer donning the red, white, and blue over in Buffalo. And, I mean, it's hard for me to hate on Singletary. I think he did what he could with the sort of offense that Buffalo ran. Even if he was seeing any sort of success out on the field, literally Dable or Dorsey would just say, you know what, it, Josh. Throw that football a mile, baby. Wasn't like anywhere near like your elite running back status. Granted, we picked him up in the third. I mean, I thought it was an okay pick. I thought he did well. Knox has been great. I feel like he's been relatively inconsistent. And so there's been a couple of years where I got super pissed off with his hands. Last year, I got mad because he just wasn't used. I feel like he wasn't used until maybe the last couple of games during the regular season. But overall, still solid. We still need some depth in that category, but he's been there. And he's been absolutely killing it for the organization. Boshawn Joseph, he's in the CFL right now, with Jaquan Johnson. He is still on the team. Great depth. Daryl Johnson no longer on the team. And then Tommy Sweeney is now on the Giants. Now, I mean, really, this draft was not sexy whatsoever. I mean, we do have a lot of potential with Dawson Knox not being utilized. Hopefully this year will be a little bit different, and maybe Ed Oliver will finally emerge. But overall, this draft really wasn't my favorite. Looking back now, I would probably have to give this draft a C. Oh no, Dan, not another ad read. Trust me, you are going to thank me for this. Now, as many of you know, I work extremely long hours, 7 a.m. until I about pass out at 11 or midnight Monday through Friday. And you would think that I would be able to go to sleep and rejuvenate. You're absolutely wrong. My mind is still going a million miles a second, and for the most part, I'm staring at my ceiling until 3 a.m. Now, that is something that I have accepted for myself, but I needed to make a change. I needed to start taking naps, but once again, I can't nap either. Whether or not that it's my FOMO, or whether or not that I just can't get comfortable enough, or it's too bright, I have had no such luck until I ended up finding the Manta sleep mask. Now, little do you know, Manta truly believes sleep needs to be the #1 priority in order to achieve that particular level of success. Now, these things are ridiculously comfortable, and literally the second that you put it on, you feel like you're right next to Aaron Rodgers during one of his darkness retreats. I mean, look at this. Literally can't see and so you know what? I should probably apply to officiate in the NFL. Prerequisites right here. Now, Manta has several selections on their website. This particular is the Sleep Mask Pro. This company and this mask has really been able to help me prioritize what is most important, and that is my sleep, so I can keep on giving you that juicy content, baby. So whatever you're doing, go to that link in my bio and make sure you put in the code DONMAFIA, and they're gonna give you an extra 10% off your first order. Trust me, you will not regret this. Night night, bitches. 2020, the COVID draft, baby. Now, we all know the Buffalo Bills did not have a first round pick that year, hence why Stephon Diggs was named to the Buffalo Bills. But so we went in there, guns a-blazing, baby. Second round, we ended up getting AJ Epinesa, Zach Moss in the third, Gabe Davis in the fourth. The fifth round was Jake Fromm. The 2 6th-rounders were Tyler Bass and Isaiah Hodgins. And the 7th round pick just so happened to be Dane Jackson. Now, AJ Epinesa was definitely one of the first pieces we wanted to implement into our defensive line. The year before, it was absolutely terrible, and frankly, in 2020, it was still pretty damn bad. But with the AJ Epinesa pick so far, I mean, yeah, he's had a couple of good games. I still think that he has a couple of years to develop, but I mean, so far, I think it's been like exactly what I expected pick, exactly the sort of production that I could see. Zach Moss was quoted in an interview right before he was drafted that tackling him would have to be a business decision, but the 1 to 2 yards he would gain up the middle suggested otherwise. Sounded like a pretty easy decision to make. Gabe Davis in the 4th round has been good. A couple of years ago, he flashed in the playoffs, as we all know. Although that I think that he wasn't as bad as a lot of Bills fans were thinking that he was, still really need him to hop up into that wide receiver 2 role. I think this year is going to be very telling on whether or not he can truly answer the call and be a bit more consistent. One thing I will give Brandon Beane is the fact that he ended up snagging this dude and finding tremendous value in the 4th. As Jake Fromm was Jake Fromm, he literally was just a roster spot for a little while. Didn't see a lot of time. I do remember when he literally, when COVID was going around, they had him in a room by himself. I have no idea how he was doing drills. He was probably just like throwing a football into like empty space at one point. But so fun fact, he's actually with the Commanders organization right now. Who would have thought? Basmatic was an absolute unit to this organization. I remember his rookie season, he missed a couple of field goals. I started calling him Tyler Ass. But then after a while, he started proving himself and being an absolute stud out there. His name transitioned over to Basmatic. He's accounted for several wins for the Buffalo Bills. Great addition on Beane's end. And so Isaiah Hodgins, although that I always wanted him to get a shot in Buffalo, just watching him flourish in New York last year was very frustrating. He just couldn't stay healthy, and now he's with Dable. Look at that. And then I would say probably the most impressive pick out of this draft, and why I'm going to grade this relatively high, Dane Jackson. Like, dude literally was CB2 last year. Literally lined up on the opposite end of Kyer Elam and Trey White when he ended up coming back. Is he an elite corner? Absolutely not. But the amount of production that we get from this guy as a starter from the 7th round is very, very impressive. With some of this late round value that Beane was able to finesse during the 2020 draft, I'm going to have to give this one a B+. 2021, Brandon Beane went into that draft with a mission. He wanted to boost up that defensive line and give Josh Allen a little protection, and damn did he deliver. He ended up getting Gregory Rousseau out of Miami, 1st round, then Boogie Basham, Spencer Brown, Tommy Doyle, Marquez Stevenson, Damar Hamlin, Rashad Wildgoose, and Jack Anderson. Now, Rousseau and Basham are still relatively raw. However, they did end up spending an entire season with Von Miller, and we ended up seeing some flashes. We're seeing these guys slowly but surely start to progress, and really hoping that this is going to be their coming out party in the 2023 season. It's too soon to actually give you a grade on either of these guys because we have to see how they further progress, but so far so good. No complaints on my end. Spencer Brown and Tommy Doyle have been a little meh, and so I'm really hoping that they can really take that next step. It's funny because if Spencer Brown is out, then Josh is running for his life, but when he is in, especially when he came back from that injury, he was still like not exactly what we desire for protection of our quarterback. I still think it's going to take some time for both of them specifically to really get caught up to speed with NFL defensive lines. But, I mean, so far, both of these offensive linemen really haven't been doing it for me. Marquez Stevenson is now on the Cleveland Browns. And so I thought Damar Hamlin did a wonderful job filling in for the injured Micah Hyde last year. And Rashad Wildgoose and Jack Anderson are nowhere near a Buffalo Bills training facility, no longer on the team. So like I said, this is very hard for me to grade because I really don't know how Rousseau, Basham, Brown, Doyle, Damar are going to further progress. But from an outsider looking in, I thought this was an okay draft. I'll give it a B. Last but certainly not least, the 2022 NFL Draft. Now, it's very hard for me to speak on a lot of these players because Sean McDermott hates rookies. We barely even know if these guys can play football in general. But speaking off of first impressions, started off with Kyer Elam. I always make this joke that McDermott refused to start Elam. He's legitimately started a 6th rounder over Elam this year for God knows why. That's just what happened. I thought that Kyer Elam, frankly, ended up winning that Miami game for us in the playoffs. I thought that he really stepped up. He did good. He's physical. He's exactly what I think the Bills needed in a DB. I'm just hoping this year that McDermott's going to have a little bit more trust in him, and we're going to see him with a hell of a lot more snaps. Number 2 is James Cook. I thought that he did pretty solid. I wanted him to break out a little bit more last year. It did kind of piss me off, though, especially since he was known as a pass-catching back. Why the did we not utilize him in the pass game, right? I think that if we go on ahead and we start implementing him into what he does best, and that is the pass catching game, I think that we'll see a lot more production out of this guy. It's that, or he gains like 40 pounds worth of muscle, and then we could just, start pounding them up the middle. Who knows? So far, very impressed with Cook. And so the 3rd round, we ended up picking Terrell Bernard. He's been a great addition right to our special teams. Definitely not a sexy pick, but something that needed to be addressed. 5th round, we ended up getting Khalil Shakir. I know a lot of us are very excited to see what this man can do in the slot. Had a couple of very flashy plays last year. Still too early to see whether or not that he could be that guy. 6th round, Matt Araiza. Moving on. 6th round, Christian Benford, who, like I said, literally stole the starting job, at least at the beginning of the season, from Elam as a 6th rounder. Bravo to Brandon Beane for being able to find somebody that has that sort of level of talent, that caliber of talent, that late in the damn draft. Absolutely wild. And so the 6th round was Luke Tenuta, and the 7th round was Balin Spector. So I know that Tenuta is no longer on the squad, and so Balin was special teams or a practice squad makeup. So overall, like I said, this is still up for debate. We have to see how these guys actually progress, and Sean McDermott actually allows them to go out and play football this year. But overall, too soon to say. I'm going to have to go solid C+. So that's a little walk down memory lane of the behavior of Brandon Beane when it comes to the draft. So who knows what we're going to expect this year, but if history serves itself, it sounds like that we're going to be going defense almost immediately. And so Bills Mafia, do me a favor and leave a comment on what your grades were for the past couple of drafts, what you expect Brandon Beane to do this year, if you see him actually calling a wild audible and not going by history. Love hearing exactly what you have to say. Thank you so much for tuning in, and before I let you go, you better always remember, let's go Buffalo.